The Big Red Couch, the podcast about making role-playing games. A group of GMs and players draw ideas from the mystery box and bring their game pitches to you.
Good evening, listener, and welcome to the Big Red Couch. I'm Ben.
And I'm Craig. There's not really a lot of change in that one, to be honest.
No, we really have to work on having more personalities or something, even if it's just the two of us.
I blame time zones. If the world was not spherical, this sort of shit wouldn't be happening.
Indeed. That is something the Flat Earthers never address, is that as bastard hard as it is, as we've just gone into daylight savings, how would it even work if it was flat? How does that even happen?
Well, there is that rapper who's trying to raise the funds to launch a satellite to prove that the world is not a sphere, so maybe it can be folded into that budget.
Maybe. Well, if they can explain daylight savings to the folks who think the extra hour of sunlight makes the blinds and their curtains fade faster, I think we'll be good. Tonight, I keep saying tonight because it is, of course, like 9 o'clock at night in New Zealand, and it's breakfast time where you are.
More or less, yeah. I mean, I think you should go with saying tonight. I can go along with saying this morning, and it will be charmingly eclectic.
That is the best we can hope for. Awesome. Okay. As I say, this evening, in episode 97, we are pondering the contribution of one Will Myers, who I've checked, and apparently he does own up to this one, the suggestion that my life is essentially the tale of Juan Bobo, only dumber, which is cool. And this is an interesting one. I have learnt something about another culture, which, being as I've just practically middle-aged, is apparently not supposed to happen anymore.
You do regard the entire rest of the world as being filled with angry ghosts. So
I am still interested in the views, perspectives, cultures, and lifestyles of the angry ghosts. I just don't want to be in the proximity of them. I'm fairly open-minded about an intellectual exchange, just, being in their malevolent immediacy, that's all.
Malevolent immediacy is a fantastic phrase. And I think we're a punk band in the 70s?
We can only hope. I'll have to link the How to Care for Your Introvert video. That was pretty funny.
Oh, yes, please do. Amusingly, for somebody whose go-to approach when he can't come up with an idea is just to Google the various words and see what happens, I never actually Googled Juan Bobo.
Oh, this is going to be exciting. Shall I give you a bit of potted, I'm trying to say anthropomorphism, but that anthropology?
Please do.
This isn't anthropomorphism until it gets very weird.
Remember that you said that.
What? It's going to get weird.
The bit before that. This isn't anthropomorphism. So, lay your wisdom on me on this fine morning.
Okay, my very, very light investigation into the cultural background of Juan Bobo is that it's quite a diverse collection of tales from Puerto Rico about a young gentleman whose name translates literally to Simple John, having misadventures and occasionally being naively wise, or the wise fool. And the tales are supposed to be instructional, kind of Aesop fable kind of things, generally about don't be silly like Juan a lot of the time. Little folk tales, and also encoded into them is a lot of cultural history about Puerto Rico, and a fair amount of sort of subversive messages about colonialism and how parts of the society interact. Well, at least that's what I've been led to believe. I've seen a few things on YouTube, charming little tales of, frankly, fellow's a little bit thick, but he seems to be doing okay. Good-hearted, that's I think the word that we should use, and it's a thread in that culture. The sad thing, this has come up during a time where Hurricane Maria, has totally screwed up all the infrastructure and killed a bunch of people. And it's my distinct hope that by the time this comes out, the situation will have improved immensely. But if you have any spare cash rattling around, I would strongly suggest, if you would like to help the inhabitants of Puerto Rico, who enjoy the fascinating status of being part of the United States that the United States can't recall consistently as part of the United States, might like the John Oliver thing from a couple of years ago, and I suspect John Oliver will probably be revisiting that, so if he does that coming week, drop that in there as well. Spare a thought for these folks, because it sounds like they're in a really difficult situation. Infrastructure has been wrecked. Health, sanitation, law and order, etc. are quite badly threatened. So it's unfortunately a bit somber time that part of the world has had really, really bad luck as far as storms have gone, but most folks are at least aware of the places that have been impacted. And There's probably a bit of like hurricane fatigue happening at this time, so I hope we don't forget.
I will admit that until you sent me that link to the fundraising appeal thing, I didn't actually know that Puerto Rico had been hit by one of the hurricanes.
Oh, I can send you graphs about how little they're talking about it. It's quite scary. The amount of news coverage, yes, it's the third big hurricane, but we were made aware that these things were lining up like buses.
There's a holding pattern of hurricanes because not all of them can hit at the same time. I did see something a little while ago where various meteorologists were doing the, well, what does happen when two really big hurricanes merge? Looks like we're about to find out.
Yeah, but that or they kind of just sort of bump along because it's like an air pressure thing, and it's like, okay, you're over there, I'm over here, it's all good. It's not great for anyone in the path, but it's kind of a sad confluence, but we will bravely make the best of it and drop some links for charities. There's one where you also get a bunch of science fiction books and so forth out of it, so you can at least have something to read while you're feeling that the weather is picking on people at the moment. Done by Fireside Fiction Company, so we'll drop that in the show as well. So, this chap, Juan, is a star of these little tales of life experience, and I think it varies wildly. I think it's become a bit of a template for various things. So, that is the cultural background.
Juan Bobo in a nutshell.
I think people could do their own little research, but he sort of lives in the same space as the Aesop's Fables, a character called Amelia Bedelia, which I've heard of and I don't know a lot about, who takes instructions to ridiculous extremes. I understand. He's the guy who does the silly thing, and he's generally pictured as a happy-go-lucky chap with relatively ragged clothing and a very impressive straw hat with a sort of like a large peak, but also comes out to a brim that just frays out, so it looks like almost like an oversized crown.
Gotcha.
So it's kind of his deal.
All right. Oh, do you?
I have come up with an idea based pretty squarely on the on what Wikipedia and so forth would tell me about the source.
All right. Well, do you want to go? I mean, I could go with my completely. You should go.
Later on in the episode, I have to accuse you for ruining democracy for New Zealand, but we can carry on with that later.
I am looking forward to that bit.
Awesome.
Just as a note to the audience, I literally have no idea what he's talking about, which is one of the reasons why I'm looking forward to it. But, it seems like the sort of thing I would have done.
Would have done?
Hypothetically.
I can probably supply very perniciously interpreted graphs for this one as well.
Well, I mean, if you've got graphs, I love a good graph.
Of course you do. You're a map nerd. Graphs are just like maps for numbers, really.
More or less.
Okay. I was struck by the idea that this is a framework for just so stories of a sort. In fact, there is Rudyard Kipling is another sort of just so stories, another sort of kind of something that fits this pattern. The idea it gave me is to flip around, in a role-playing context, the normal organization of the protagonisthood of role-playing games. The idea would be that your central character, your Juan Bobo, or your, trying to think of another, maybe a Brer Fox or Brer Rabbit, something like that. The central character in the middle of these stories is played by one person who is kind of the GM or maybe kind of the only player. They have a task they have to set out to complete. The rest of the people around the table playing the various things that are trying to complicate their life. And since one's general fate is to be set to go and get something from the market, or to borrow the neighbour's biggest pot and bring it back, or to wash the pig to make sure it's looking its best so it can be sold at market. Misadventures happen, largely because one interprets things remarkably poorly, but giving a framework to actually have these things play out is something that struck me as an idea. And I had a notion, I think you've probably heard me talk about this before, but the idea of distributing cards, and in this case, totally prefabricated playing cards, to help guide the story is what the idea that I've come up with. I've not come across the notion before, but the idea that if you have effectively Juan's travels laid down as a set of playing cards, do you happen to have a pack of playing cards handy, or something that will resemble that?
I do not personally know.
Okay. If you cast your time back to the 7th form common room playing 500 for days on end.
Watching people play 500, but yes, I spent an entire year watching people play 500, and at the end of that year still had no idea what the rules of the game were.
I think that may have been the point. I picked it up eventually. But if you recall, all of your non-face cards have pips on them. The idea that I've come up with is that people are given a small hand of cards, maybe 4 or 5, and you can lay them down on the table adjacent to one of the card, provided that they have the same number of pips on a side, left, right, or top, bottom, and that allows you to put another element into the story and continue the progress. So this means, slightly counterintuitively, that you can put a 2 by 4, because they have two rows of pips, the 2 having 1 each, the 4 having 2 each.
Yep.
You could also put a 6, top or bottom of the 4, because it's got 2 columns, sorry.
Okay, so it's similar to matching dominoes, but you've got a couple of
Pretty
different
much
dimensions that you can do it in. Okay, I get the idea.
Yeah. So, and working out the numbers and how best to line them up is something that's going to need a little bit of workshopping, naturally. And the idea is that I'd have the suits represent different sort of compulsions that affect the character. And for one, I'd go something like have diamonds represent cunning, spades representing duty, hearts representing community or pro-social kind of feeling, and clubs representing courage. So if a player says, all right, the bridge is very rickety, you've got to be brave to cross it, they would play a club card. Or they'd have a club card and they go, okay, what am I going to make a challenge about courage? And the player, the person being Juan Bobo, would come up with something to override that. So they would say, okay, I'm going to place a heart next to it because Juan's very, very concerned about this community and doing and fetching whatever he needs to do and so forth, and work those elements in there. It's not that the idea would be that you are trying to limit. Well, it's the idea is to focus people's engagement with the story, and you can just introduce stuff. You can make shit up, but it's just not wildly off the top of your head.
Bit of structure to the thing.
Bit of structure, and the face cards would come up as effectively characters, and you can use that as a bit of inspiration for what kind of character that one's trying to, convince to let them work on their farm or to lend the big cooking pot or something like that. And while the player has pretty much limitless power to talk about the resolution, it has to be in the context of simple peasant lad figures out how to fix a problem. And sometimes maybe gets it wrong. It's very much bare bones this time, and how you scale up to be a big experience, that I'm not sure about yet.
So does the person playing one change?
That's a good question. Probably not. I think I'd make it a relatively short game, like a less than an hour kind of thing.
Okay, so it's almost a reversal of the standard 1 GM multiple players.
Yep, absolutely.
Because in this case you have multiple GMs and 1 player. Okay.
Yep, and the player is invested with a lot of power. One is the hero. He's he does things in a certain way, and one goes to work. He does several very foolish things, like he gets where he's supposed to put the beans wrong and gets things backwards, and people, oh, Juan, you're very silly, and sends him home. He milks the cow, is given the milk as payment, puts the milk from the pail into the burlap sack and attempts to carry it home. Things like that. But his ridiculousness ends up curing an ailing child by causing him to laugh. So, yeah, it's a little bit magical. And I think it would probably be even more effective if your character is more of a cunning kind of trickster, because he's supposed to be a bit tricky. I've most of the story I've seen to be for children, so there's less subversive stuff, and it's more that gosh, isn't one silly? But the idea of you playing it as a trickster kind of character who has this sort of tool set, but is being challenged by the world to highlight how they deal with things. I mean, and there's tricksters from all sorts of walks of life. I tried to think of a local analogue for one, and I'm not aware of one. The best sort of fit as like a folklore hero was Maui, and
yeah, there's the occasional trickstery bit, but mostly not so much.
Maui was not a dim guy. He was demigod status. He would go and do outrageous things to fix problems. It's like, we've been rowing for a while, we haven't spotted the land. What do? I hook a fish big enough to be an island. Sorted.
Or the days are too short and we can't get anything done. Let's just go beat the shit out of the sun so he slows down a bit.
A very kind of specific mode of dealing with problems, but a distinct difference on the whole competency angle. But
yes,
it definitely has it has a particular feel to it, and that sort of thing could fit as well. The idea that you would be dealing with characters and someone they would throw up personalities to get in the way there. So that needs a crap load of work, but could be a really simple, portable idea for sort of telling a folkloric kind of tale. And hell, you could build in a thing where you either say, use established one, invent one where we're Beatles or something.
Would the story branch? Because you've got that spatial arrangement thing going on.
That is an excellent question. I think it could, but yeah, I'd have to think about how. Possibly if they get in a sort of a fetch questy kind of, I've got to go to this person to get this, but they want this. Basically backtrack and go off the other spur to go and find another person who has this thing. Because that's a fairly heroic quest, even if it is a relatively minor thing.
Well, take the MacGuffin to the MacGuffin disposal facility is
Yes.
literally the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, but, let it evolve a couple of layers deep into the, we need to go to this person to get this, but they need this to get this, they need this to get this. Don't go any deeper than that. And working in things where, once you've got 3 face cards in your chain, you're good. You don't need any more rules to limit things from sprawling out of control. That would make sense. So, yeah, that's a fine question, the kind of thing that playtesting would hopefully help resolve.
I like it. It's certainly a very different approach to the protagonist dynamic and to just how play around the table works. Because, I know of a number of GM-less games, any number of 1 GM games, but I don't know of that many N-1 GM games, as it were.
I think the closest I'm aware of is Kagamatsu. Yeah, giving the protagonist the majority of the power and then giving the rest of the players giving obstacles to get in the way. And there will be some incentive for the antagonist players that's probably the other reason to use cards. So if you're the person who wants, say, one to be brave, maybe you're encouraging them to take bravery things, and you can look at points afterwards. Or maybe you've got a specific agenda hidden amongst things, and you can select cards to advance your little agenda. Nothing diplomacy level, not even risk level, probably. Just something to keep people awake.
So more Cluedo level machination.
Yeah. Actually, that would be fine. That would be, let's race to find out what Juan is Juaning today.
For a second there, when you were talking about the cards, and I flashed to the fact that I now possess a deck of Scrum Poker cards.
Okay.
Which are apparently a thing for technical scrums for deciding what's the next priority.
Right. So you're talking about agile development and stuff.
Probably.
I've heard of this thing. I've been promised by many slide packs our company uses this process. And I've noticed people tittering behind their hands or, outright slapping of the knee when this is talked about.
I discovered during my job interview that I'd used, I think, Agile by accident in a previous job. But it was mostly, okay, what's my top priority? What's next? Give me a hit list here.
Yeah, exactly. It's a way of structuring the fail faster, iterate, test. You've listened to I've just started listening to 99% Visible, and they are very big on that shit. So I suspect you would have probably soaked stuff up by osmosis listening to that over the years.
Yeah, that's true.
That's precisely the process there. Probably, and it's the kind of process that we should. He turns to the audience, looks them squarely in the eye, and says, "If we were a real role-playing games design / idea podcast, we'd be encouraging you to do things like this, not just sit around and talk bullshit. But I'm sorry, we're not. All right, so
you chose poorly."
Indeed.
So I wondered for a second, is this some sort of bidding thing? And no, actually, you're using the arrangement of the cards, which is much more fun for me. As you say, it would need a crap ton of playtesting, but so should everything.
I think it's really inobvious where it'll fall down at this point. I mean, some things you go, okay, this is going to be the tricky part. And I was looking at this guy, I don't know, let's try it. Maybe it's good.
Not exactly sure where that's going to happen. Yeah.
Absolutely. And, maybe a terrible idea, but you can only try it and find out. So, What would you like to speak of now? I can accuse you of destroying our parliamentary system.
Let's do that bit. I'm anxious to find out how I have destroyed our parliamentary system.
This turned into damn near 9 minutes of conversation about New Zealand politics. So I've cut it out and tacked it on to the end of the show for anybody who, having listened to an episode, still wants to hear even more of our voices. And to that person, I salute you.
Alright, so apparently Ben was correct and it is actually all my fault. Fair enough.
I thought you needed to know.
Do you feel better now?
No. So, what was your idea, Craig?
Okay, I didn't look up Juan Bobo, mostly because I sort of looked at this and an idea came to mind. And my usual trick of let's just Google a phrase and see what happens really only works when I've run out of ideas. So that's how I ended up with my bizarre monastic Scooby-Doo exercise for Cenobite Scooby-Doo.
You didn't want to sully your perfect, fully formed idea with, any facts or whatever.
Well, because I had absolutely no idea about the existence of Juan Bobo, I assumed it was just a name that Will had put in there because he thought it sounded good.
Right.
This also is partially the fault of, or more accurately stolen from, the fact that I went back to the very start of the Monkeys Took My Jetpack podcasts and I've been listening through those. And I thought I would only listen to a few of them, and I've hit episodes in the high 20s, so at this point I think I'm just in it for the duration. But they've been playing a lot of Sorcerer of Zoe, which as a game is very fairy tale. So that kind of put me in mind of, well, there's a setting. And then the other thing that came to mind is a spot on my travels through the US. A friend advised me to go and visit Washington Park in Portland, which is a very lovely park, and they've got redwoods. And in particular, there was a viewing platform that I realized if you stood in just the right place, it essentially looked like you were standing at the prow of a ship, kind of Titanic style, except sailing through a forest.
Cool. Weird, but cool.
Yeah, and that more or less gave me the setup here. And for some reason, the name of Juan Bobo just sounded like the name of a monkey. Not sure why.
I kept getting bedtime for Bonzo and bedtime for Bobo stuck in my head, so that might be why.
Okay, so it's Ronald Reagan films. All right. So, Juan Bobo is a monkey. Maybe a stuffed toy monkey. Maybe a circus monkey. Doesn't really matter. But Juan Bobo styles himself as a great explorer and adventurer. It is the captain of a ship that inexplicably sails through forests and on land and that sort of thing.
So, a geographically curious George.
Nice. Very nice. Geographically curious George. Like it. So yes, this is Juan Bobo. I sort of imagine a monkey of fairly standard, I don't know, maybe knee-high, but wearing elaborate or at least vaguely piratical and explorer sort of uniform. Juan Bobo is an idiot. But he's a legend of sorts, partially in his own mind, but also gets successes. And Juan Bobo and his crew survive their adventures and expeditions more or less unscathed most of the time. So think pirates from Pirates in an Adventure with... Was it Pirates in an Adventure with Scientists? It was the Aardman movie.
Yeah. It sounds a little bit Baron Munchausen as well.
Yeah, a little bit Baron Munchausen, but more of an idiot.
Yeah, Baron was pretty idiotic at times, but fair enough. Fair enough.
Bits of Baron Munchausen, but also quite a lot of the pirates and a few other things where you've got this protagonist who has a rather grandiose view of themselves, is a bit of an idiot, but it mostly works out, often due to the people around them. And at some level, they are aware of it. I mean, it's one of the things I liked about the Pirates films, is that the pirate captain is actually aware of the fact that it's his crew that is hauling his ass out of things most of the time.
It's nice that's acknowledged, certainly.
At least that's what I took away from it. And so, yes, the line in question, "My life is essentially the tale of a Juan Bobo, only dumber," is delivered by one of the crew, possibly the first mate, on the grounds that Juan Bobo is a known idiot. He's serving under him.
Right. So, gamifically, never going to be a widely used term.
No.
How does that resolve?
Gamifically, I think you are playing the fairly small crew of Juan Bobo's ship. Juan Bobo is probably not one of the players. I think Juan Bobo is the thing that drives the plot. That a lot of the time you are having to rescue yourselves from the idiotic situation that Juan Bobo has got you into this time.
I'm almost certain this kind of plot device main character does exist. I can't think of an example off the top of my head. Not quite like a Mr. Magoo who just bumbles
is bumbling.
Yeah, not strictly the mode, but the fact that he's the main character in as much as people are just trying to avoid killing him or are standing around aghast as he wombles through the situation. But there's got to be something similar, that there is a hard-working, slightly put-upon team trying to look out for this inspired but basically self-harm prone focus of attention.
I'd go with sort of as level of idiocy, more and more I'm thinking the pirate captain. Full of enthusiasm, full of self-belief, not as full of skill as they imagine themselves to be, but are capable of bringing the rest of the crew along.
They're good at inspiring people, and they're good at mounting these expeditions or, getting people all fired up, but execution, not really their strong point.
Indeed. And yeah, I would be running it as a fairly light-hearted sort of game. I suspect doing it as almost in the beer and pretzels mode. If I was running this as sort of as an extended game, it would be for a beer and pretzel sort of game session, where each session is one complete adventure start to finish. That's where I'd be aiming it. You've gone to do this thing, it's all gone horribly wrong, and at the end of the day, you haven't come away fabulously rich, but you've got some of the Aztec gold, and the Chupacabra ate the rest.
You survived the heck out of that adventure.
Yes, you survived the hell out of that. I think is a very good thing to aim for the end.
Professional adventure survivors definitely I think it's the vibe.
Pretty much, yes. So, yeah, nobody's going to die over the course of this. They might get eaten by something, but they'll probably be barfed up again.
There's lots of ignominious fates, but the ultimate fate is you keep working for Captain Juan Bobo.
Yeah. Another example might be Jack Sparrow from the Pirates of the Caribbean films, because he's a bit of an idiot. He's competent in his own areas.
Some of his judgment calls are questionable. I didn't see all of them, however many there were. Don't tell me there were 5, but I get the impression he didn't really have a very loyal crew behind him.
There were 1 or 2 crew members who seemed to stick around, possibly out of ghoulish curiosity. I'd basically go with Jack Sparrow, but treats people better. The pirate captain, but a monkey. That kind of thing. I mean, they don't actually have to be sailing a ship. I just rather liked the idea of inexplicably sailing a ship through a forest. How does that work? Very well, provided you avoid the big trees.
Yes. How did we get in this situation? Don't ask. It's not worth explaining.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
That's where I went with this one.
So the party are the crew attempting, as stated, to survive the hell out of the adventure and try and make some sort of advantage out of the whole process, but largely to get as much of the ship, the captain, and the rest of the crew back safely as possible.
Yes. I mean, you could do it with a PC Juan Bobo. I think you'd either want to pick the player carefully so that you don't get somebody who just takes it as, I'm going to create as much chaos as I possibly can all the time, because that would get annoying really fast.
People who do that will be annoying anyway, so and maybe even useful to give them their head if they're going to do that sort of thing. System-wise, you might not do badly having a look at Lady Blackbird. There's a lot of interpersonal stuff, but the idea of the travelling, they would have more sort of intrigue, and you might have to knock some of the intrigue and so forth, the personal stuff, out of it a little bit. But I think it would also be interesting to have things going on while they do the crazy adventure amongst the crew.
Nice. Quags or fate are unfair things to throw in there because from a certain point of view, you do damn near anything with those. Yeah, similar to GURPS for an earlier generation.
No, strong conviction that that the system matters and the system does at very least shape the experience. Sure, you can GURPS anything, but you'll either have a game which is occasionally, suddenly, frighteningly fatal, or you'll have nerfed it to the point where it's kind of not GURPS anymore.
I was thinking you could get some mileage out of using Fate or Fate Accelerated if you had Juan Bobo as a player and just loaded them up with, yeah, they are effectively a fate point generating machine for the scenario.
Right, for the Dreamstone sort of situation, they're running neck deep, so they are constantly on a treadmill of compels and so forth.
Yeah, you set them up with a bunch of compels, overconfident. I am a great adventurer, this sort of thing. And a chunk of the time what they're going to be doing is throwing fate points to other people to get them out of trouble.
They're like a high-speed laundering.
Pretty much, yeah.
They do a lot of fate point laundering, and people actually, execute on getting them out. Yeah, that works. That's pretty interesting.
I ended up doing a bunch of that for a Atomic Robo game I played at Gen Con a few years ago, where I ended up playing Robo because nobody else wanted to.
Weird.
A focal canon character can be, some people don't like playing that. I kind of took it as the goal of, I am not going to run roughshod over this entire game. So basically, every time there was a combat, I tried to get myself into the situation where I was just being bashed around, generating fate points and throwing them at other people. I think for the final conflict, I was under 2 meters of rubble and a T-Rex. And so it was mostly just attempting to help out by shouting insults at Dr. Dinosaur.
And sometimes being the character that draws all the fire, either from a purely technical, mechanical tanking kind of perspective, or just kind of being the big glowing neon sign in the party, is perfectly valid and can really work with somebody's playstyle. I think it's valid. I've not often seen it like built into a system. Well, to a degree, I mean, the Buffy the Vampire Slayer and so forth with drama points and so forth. These people do all the combat, but the sidekicks have all the ability to change the plot.
I haven't read the Doctor Who RPG enough to know whether that does that as well.
It would be a good candidate for it, clearly. I don't know enough about it. Whether you actually have someone playing the Doctor, I would be interested to see how they did it either way. The idea of either giving one player a level 900 years old Time Lord or making them into the most annoying GM PC ever, both have challenges.
Yes. In the hands of that GM, because I think we all know who we're talking about, I certainly have an image in mind. Juan Bobo as a GM PC would be profoundly annoying and would be left behind half an hour into the game.
Yeah. Any tool can be used as a weapon, put it that way. If you put highly visible warning signs and safety catches on them, maybe it's less likely that they will be. Certainly by accident.
So if somebody's going to shit up your game, they're going to do it on purpose.
Well, yeah.
And that's helpful somehow.
Seriously, that is, if somebody displays that sort of behavior, you can take it as read that they don't want to play with you again because that's how they're behaving.
More or less.
Yep.
Okay, so yes, that was my research light, by which I mean no research whatsoever. Juan Bobo.
Nice. I actually like that one. Yeah, that sounds like quite cool. Like I say, Baron Munchausen, I'm sure there's an incompetent... Because we've had a similar sort of thing with Bond behind the scenes episode from Yonderback. The idea of James Bond being basically Archer.
He's the distraction. He actually thinks he's good at all of these things.
To be fair, for the character, Archer is actually incredibly competent at being a spy, provided he is drunk. So the idea of somebody actually being shepherded through these things, and they are just the big blazing neon sign. I think it'd be a fun idea in almost any system as a bit of a release mechanism. You could fit that kind of thing in. It would have a different weighting depending on the brutality of the system and the seriousness of the world and so forth. But I think it's still a very valid kind of situation.
Millennium's in.
Yeah, well, I think in a game where it's like, I'll just stop in this jungle clearing to shine my second lieutenant's bars. It's going to be a very, very short, messy punctuation too. Well, we didn't get a chance to hate that NPC. Do you think the next one will be any better?
That is fair, yes.
You kind of got posited a question on the Big Red Couch chat space. Do you like to address Tim?
All right, yes. This was a comment on
the Big Red Couch Laura Depps episode itself.
Okay, I'm going to have to just look at what the hell is happening with my email, because...
Yep.
What the hell? I mean, I found some emails from my parents sitting in my spam folder at one point, which seems harsh. So, Tim comments on the Lore Adepts episode. Craig's idea sounds a lot like how Mongoose's edition of RuneQuest interpreted hero questing. Hero questing involves taking on the mantle of gods and reenacting elements of myth for material benefits. In the Mongoose editions, actually I think it might have been the massive amount of source materials written for earlier editions, it was established that, because the gods existed out of time, changing things in your reenactment could actually retroactively change how the myth played out for the gods. There was a group in Mongoose RuneQuest called the God Learners who were trying to change the nature of reality through targeted hero questing. Worth noting, earlier and later editions of RuneQuest are set near the end of the Third Age of Glorantha, with the Second Age being lost to confusion and chaos. The God Learners aren't around. Mongoose RuneQuest is set in the Second Age.
Interesting.
Very interesting. Okay, so you're rewriting your own deities.
Well, the performance of rites and rituals and so forth, and the changes over time, and since if the whole belief causes gods thing, make perfect sense that they change over time. Possibly not retroactively, but maybe the time that the mountains wrestled back in the ages, there's reenacted as sumo, if they were wearing silly hats at the times, maybe something tangential would be altered.
I am having trouble figuring out both how that would affect the game, and to a certain extent, how it wouldn't rewrite the damn thing from the ground up.
Well, that's the thing. They're out of time. So basically you are editing what the gods' apprehensions of who they are is, rather than changing any period in history. But the gods will, because they're eternal, not know any different at that point. And, maybe that's the thing. Maybe the various pantheons of gods have just been whatever's the flavour of the month. Maybe they're just that shallow.
Interesting. You can see it happening, certainly if you've got any kind of theocratic empire or crusade going on, then, yeah, that gives you something very, very obvious to aim for of, how do we get this guy to just calm the hell down?
Yeah. Or maybe it's the previous regime, the previous theocracy made the god like this, and you're trying to chill him out. Or something like that. It won't mean that the local version of the Inquisition didn't happen. And, that's just demonstrably what's happened from time to time. Gods have a changed appearance, and, it's very much American gods kind of negotiating with the powers that run the world because the world runs the powers.
And it's an interesting way of implementing the I punch you in the backstory mechanic in a much more fantasy sort of way.
It's certainly very fantasy. It's a bit of a bank shot as well. It's rather than, aha, I've gone and changed your mind. It's like, I've gone and changed your god's mind. Do you want to think about what's going on there? Maybe make a few different life choices?
Nice. Yeah, I mean, I don't have anything other than that's a really interesting take, both on the theology of a game and also on changing the gods' minds and myths and backstories, or how that then affects everything else. It's taking the edge off a god, or possibly adding an edge to a god, as it were.
Gods are pretty edgy. Cool. Well, thank you, Tim.
Yes, thank you, Tim.
You should write a reply on the board.
I will do this thing, and I will also, once and for all, figure out where the hell those emails are going to where I am concerned, and make sure I actually get to them. This is not the first time this has happened, and it's starting to annoy me.
And at this stage, I guess what we should do is maybe pull some cards, because we have an episode to set up for next time.
Indeed. All right.
I'll be right back.
Diddle-diddle, 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 diddle-diddle.
I am back. Will has updated me on Twitter that the email he sent the Juan Bobo idea in was sent in late 2014. So that is how quickly we work, folks. There were 3 other prompts that we've already done, but yeah, we're conservative with how quickly we go through some of the ideas. They're all good. They're all perfect.
I can hear little riffling noises.
Alrighty, left or right?
Left.
Left or right again?
Left. I'm hoping this has an effect on New Zealand's political climate.
Alrighty, I flip it over. Dude.
What?
Evil Sidekick Hangout from Will Myers.
Thank you, Will.
And we might as well get 99 set up.
All right. What is episode 99 going to be? Because we already know what episode 100 is going to be.
Shall we announce the epic in episode 100?
Nah, let's leave it as a surprise.
Okay, left, right.
Let's just assume we go left all the time.
Left, flip over. Canned pasta and other nightmares from Taz.
I can't help but feel that there's a story in that one. All right. Well, thank you, Will, for the idea. Thank you, Tim, for the RuneQuest changing the gods themselves thing, because that's pretty cool.
I thought RuneQuest was just about ducks.
How many editions were the ducks in there?
I don't know. I really don't know.
I've never played RuneQuest. I got turned off by the sheer number of people who said that they would play RuneQuest, but they wouldn't have the ducks. Whereas I said, come on, the ducks are pivotal. I know nothing about the game, but the ducks seem like they should be pivotal.
Yes.
I mean, who doesn't want to play Donald Duck running somebody through with a spear? I may have a warped view of how the ducks work, to be honest.
It could be Howard the Duck running someone through with a spear. That's even darker.
You're right. Or Scrooge McDuck doing it, which is practically just sort of a stand-in for generalised global capitalism, really.
It's pretty much canon.
It seems like the sort of thing you'd do. It's not gold all the way down, it's also sort of business rivals.
Have you seen the reboot yet?
There's a reboot?
It's a reboot. DuckTales reboot. That's why I did the woohoo.
Oh.
David Tennant plays Scrooge and is pretty bloody brilliant at it. I think it's his normal voice, actually.
So he just goes full Scottish on it.
Oh, yeah. It's pretty fantastically Scottish. Okay. Thank you to Tim and to Will, and we will see you next time for Evil Sidekick Hangout.
Have a good day, everyone.
Bye.
Want to hear more of our shenanigans? Then go to hoarde.net and click on the button that looks like a couch. The Big Red Couch is released under Attribution, Non-Commercial, Share-alike 3.0 Unported from creativecommons.org. All music on the show comes from the album Universal Fluff Theory by Krakatoa. Visit them at krakatoa.com or follow the link from our page. See you next time!
What would you like to speak of now? I can accuse you of destroying our parliamentary system.
Let's do that bit. I'm anxious to find out how I have destroyed our parliamentary system.
Okay, so as you are no doubt aware, and our viewers are probably dimly aware at least, New Zealand held an election last weekend. This will be 3 weeks prior to the... Oh, it was in September of 2017, future people. You'll figure it out.
Yeah, by the time you're listening to this, that election will have been about 4 weeks ago.
Indeed, and it probably will have just been resolved.
If we're lucky.
If we are very lucky. We use MMP, which multiple...
Mixed member proportional.
Oh my goodness, you remembered that one here.
To be fair, I do have my voting papers in front of me.
I'm trying to rephrase the acronym because it has to go something like mainly at the mercy of Peters.
Nice. It should be pointed out that the way it works is that people will vote for who they want as the person representing their geographic region. There is a second vote for this is the party that I want running things. And the parliament is made up of parliamentarians who were voted in by their geographic area, plus extra people from the parties to make up more or less the right proportion of votes. And what this tends to mean is that every 3 years we go to the polls, people vote for who they want, and then the same guy gets to decide who's the government.
It's only happened like 3 times now, max. And it only happens if the country is really unclear about, collectively, about who they want in power. Which I think is...
It's the system working as intended.
It is actually, yeah, you're entirely correct. The system working as intended. If there was a issue we've got, is that we've got 2 major parties, 2 minor parties, and a bunch of shrapnel. One of the minor parties is slightly bigger, one of the major parties is slightly bigger. But neither of the major parties this time could carry it off by themselves. And unfortunately, the most closely aligned major and minor coalition, or possible coalition, that being the Labour and Greens party, couldn't quite make a government by themselves.
Filling in for the audience, Labour Party came out of trade union movement.
That was a long time ago.
Yeah, a long time ago. A bit left. Green Party, environmental, a bit more left.
Please be aware, this is New Zealand. For our American listeners, this is pretty freaking far left. These are a little bit right of Bernie Sanders, a little bit left of Bernie Sanders. So yeah, don't think Democrats. There's a whole fascinating story where they changed their leadership 6 weeks before the election, and one of the youngest MPs, who happened to be a woman, just revived the chances of the party overnight and ran a really good race and nearly pulled it off. The polls were fluctuating wildly for a while, so it was a bit of a roller coaster. But basically, if they'd stuck with the same party leader, this wouldn't have happened because the incumbents would have had a 4th term, which is not quite unprecedented, but pretty rare. It hasn't happened lately. For a long time, New Zealand was these guys haven't been doing me any good for the last 3 years. Let's change them, and it was all kind of. It was kind of a monopole. It would just kind of flip backwards and forwards. God, we've been talking about politics for several minutes now. Let's roll this up. But basically, there is a bit of confusion. There's a gentleman called Winston Peters who broke away from the centre-right party, formed something called New Zealand First, which is not as racist as many people overseas will probably think it is, but it's still kind of racist. He currently has basically the voting, the block of seats that could fulfill either party's wildest dreams and put them into government. But he kind of hates everybody, and right now he is getting all the attention, and that suits him just fine.
Yeah, it's basically your grumpy, slightly racist uncle has the deciding vote, and he's loving it.
He is definitely not adverse to a bit of publicity as our Winnie. So I'm
excited to find out how this is my fault.
Collectively, special vote casters, like people from overseas, have delayed the process at least 2 more weeks because they have to count all the votes that are coming in. Boom. Thank you.
There was a mic drop in there, wasn't there? I could tell.
Indeed.
That's fair. If it helps, once I got past the inconvenient at the very last minute, oh yeah, we need you to confirm your address details.
Right.
They haven't changed since 6 weeks ago when I last confirmed them. The getting signed up to be allowed to vote from overseas was a bit of an ordeal. The actual voting thing was just, you can now download the papers specific to you. You fill them out, you get somebody to sign them, you take a photograph of them and upload them.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah, don't even need to scan them.
So as long as the name's been crossed off the roll in the appropriate place, they shoot it through? Huh.
I mean, to be fair, of the 2 votes, the only one that actually counts would be the party vote, the one for my area. Or basically, if you put absolutely everybody else together, they still wouldn't beat the incumbent.
Well, that's where gerrymandering comes from. I do kind of have to snort slightly in the direction of people that, your local votes are wasted because, yeah, sure they are, unless the other people don't cast their local votes. I mean, we live in a part of Auckland which is ruled with an iron fist by an ex-gardening show presenter.
Yeah?
Ugh. Yeah, Maggie Barry. She was so nice to the plants and flowers and people's gardens and spoke so cheerfully about it, but I think her ruthless neocon tendencies came out when she started dealing with the undesirables there.
Well, yeah, if you've got a sort of an iron fist with the rhododendrons, then... All right, so apparently Ben was correct, and it is actually all my fault. Fair enough.
I thought you needed to know.
Do you feel better now?
No. Why would you feel better? Oh dear.
Incidentally, just because I think it's funny, running down the list of parties that you can vote for in New Zealand, we did have the Aotearoa Legalised Cannabis Party, the Internet Party, the New Zealand Outdoors Party, the New Zealand People's Party, and my personal favourite for confusing the hell out of everybody, the Ban 1080 Party, which has absolutely nothing to do with screen resolution.
Down with 1080p. No.
4K or nothing.
That's kind of poison used for controlling possums. Oh yes, we nearly forgot the Cat Haters Anonymous almost got a percentage point of the votes.
Yes, I'm not going to name that party, or I prefer not to, because screw that guy.
The galling thing is they had some really good policies. They're just presented by a total whack job who can't deal with people.
Yeah.
He's got a kind of a PR problem.
I think part of his PR problem is who he is. But anyway, let's see how much of this actually survives the editing process. I'm actually tempted to maybe tack this bit onto the end of the episode rather than, what's the right phrase, shit up the flow of the show by...
Oh, it's his gold, man. We don't get any better than this.
And that's the problem right there.
Can be true. Okay, if Craig's nerve fails him, this is the end of the show. Thanks, everyone, for dropping in and listening to Ben and Craig's New Zealand Politics Corner.
Next week, we're going to be tackling the political situation in Montserrat.
Probably with a great deal more accuracy and compassion, to be honest, but fair enough. So, what was your idea, Craig?